Good afternoon, everybody. It is my distinct pleasure to open this event on celebrating this very important month of honoring the Latino, Latinx, and Hispanic heritage in the United States. And as a School of International Affairs and as a program of Latin American studies with a heavy emphasis on international affairs, I thought that it would be very appropriate to invite to this event today, to invite Ambassador Lino Gutiérrez, a distinguished retired ambassador, US ambassador, and also a distinguished faculty member of our Latin American Studies program. I will not introduce Ambassador Gutirez because that will be done by the co-president of LATAM, the Student Association, Ali Dumbach. I will, however, welcome all the attendants not only on behalf of the Latin American Hemispheric Studies program, but also on behalf of the other co-sponsors of the event, the Diversity and Inclusion Program. Kelly Stam is here with us, as well as the Leadership and Ethic and Practice Initiative. So this is an event that is being co-sponsored by the three of us. Even though I'm not going to introduce Ambassador Gutirez, because that will, as I said, be done by Ali Dumbach, I want to just mention one very important role and contribution that Ambassador Gutirez played in US Latin American relations. And that was his presence 20 years ago, was it? Yeah, 2011, exactly 20, no, I'm sorry, 1991, 20 years ago, celebrating, 30 years ago, sorry, celebrating the signing of the Inter-American Development, the Inter-American Democratic Charter. I was at that event as ambassador of Paraguay to the Organization of American States, and Ambassador Gutirez was part of the party with the Secretary of State and Colin Powell. Unfortunately, we were celebrating at the same time the signing of such an important document, the Inter-American Democratic Charter, with the terrorist attacks of September 11 on the Twin Towers and the other attacks that against the United States and against democracy in the war. So it was a day in which we were a very tragic day on the one hand, but also a very happy day for Latin America. And Ambassador Gutirez played a very significant role in that event. But I'm not going to speak, as I said, about other distinguished services played by Ambassador Gutirez. I will simply stop my intervention here, welcoming all of you again, thanking Ambassador Gutirez for his willingness to be with us and share his experience with our students, and asking Ali Dumbach, co-president of LATAM, to say a few words of welcome and introduce you with all you distinguished career in the Foreign Service of the United States. Thank you very much.
Okay, hi everyone.
Thank you, Diego.
I'm gonna start first of all by saying thank you. It's a really pleasure and I'm proud, we are honored to be participating on this event with Ambassador Lino Gutiérrez and with Professor Diego Avente, who is the director of the Latin American and Hemispheric Studies program, as well as with the Elliott School. As Diego said, Ali and me are the co-presidents of LATAM at GW, which is a professional research and social forum dedicated to bring together students who share a broadly defined interest in Latin America and the Caribbean, And one of our goals is to promote awareness and knowledge of the region's trials, contributions, and diversity. And that's why we think that this event is really interesting, and it's going to be great because of having a person of the experience in the area as Lino. So it's really, really a pleasure. With that brief introduction of the organization and us, I want to ask Ali to introduce Lino and to give a brief description of him. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you, Ari. Yep, like Ari said, my name is Ali Dunbar. I'm one of the other co-presidents of LatinGW. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Ambassador Lino Gutiérrez. He is the executive director of the Una Chapman Cox Foundation, which is dedicated to a strong and professional foreign service. He is also the CEO of Gutirez Global LLC, a consulting firm specializing on strategic advice for corporations interested in investing in Latin America and Europe. He is a professional lecturer at George Washington University, and he's on the board of the Institute for the Study of Diplomacy at Georgetown University. In his 29-year foreign service career, Mr. Gutierrez served 6 U.S. presidents and 11 secretaries of state. His last posting was as ambassador to Argentina from 2003 to 2006. During his tenure, the United States and Argentina signed agreements on counterterrorism and counter-narcotics cooperation and container security. In 2005, the ambassador welcomed President Bush to Argentina as he attended the Summit of the Americas. Lino Gutiérrez has been the recipient of the State Department's Distinguished Honor Award, Superior Honor Award twice, and Meritorious Honor Award 3 times. He has also earned the U.S. Army's Civilian Award. A native of Havana, Cuba, Gutiérrez has a master's and bachelor's degree from the University of Alabama and also attended the University of Miami. After graduating from college, he taught social studies for the Dade County school system and the Urban League before beginning his outstanding career with the Department of State. So with that, Ambassador Gutiérrez, I give the microphone to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Diego. Thank you, Adi and Ali and LATAM and LAHSP for sponsoring me. I really appreciate it. I want to wish everybody a happy Hispanic Heritage Month. Today's the last day, from September 15th to October 15th. But to highlight the contributions that Hispanic Latinos make to the United States. And I think it's very apropos right now at a time when we are 18% of the US population and every day are making tremendous contributions in many areas. So I just want to share my story a little bit so you know who's talking to you. I am a native of Havana, Cuba. And, you know, I was born to a middle-class family in Cuba. My father was a mathematician, a university professor, and my mother was a teacher, but a stay-at-home mom with me. I was an only child. And we lived a pretty comfortable middle-class existence in Cuba until the political events that really disrupted the country of my birth. And it started in 1952 with a dictator named Fulgencio Batista, who took over the country with the help of the military at a time when a free election was supposed to be taking place. And that led to the July 26 movement, led by Fidel Castro and others who were fighting against Batista. And on January 1, 1959, Fidel Castro comes to power with the support of, I would say, 80 to 90% of the Cuban people, including my parents, who thought we had entered a new era of democracy and respect for human rights and civil society and all that. It didn't turn out to be that way. And in 1961, my mother and I and 4 cousins and an aunt left for Cali, Colombia, where we had some relatives, spent a year there. My father was able to leave a little bit later. And then we settled in the US. My father got a job at the University of Alabama teaching mathematics. And that, of course, allowed us to come to the United States, where we would go to Miami every summer to get our fill of Cuban food, black beans and rice, meet with relatives, and then come back. And when I went to college, I know a lot of you guys had choices to go to the Ivy League or California or something. My father said the good news is you're going to college. The better news is you're going to the University of Alabama because I get a discount there. So I went there, majored in political science, and then I taught school in Miami, Florida for 2 years. It was something like what you have at AmeriCorps today in a disadvantaged community. And after that, I got a master's in Latin American Studies at Alabama. And then I joined the Foreign Service, where I stayed for 29 years. So when I arrived in Washington, D.C. with my 1966 Mustang, drove into Roslyn because the Foreign Service Institute was in Roslyn, Virginia at that time. And I went for my first day of orientation. I was in a room with 30 people, 30 new Foreign Service officers, including myself. And I was the only Latino. There were 2 African Americans and 3 women out of the 30. Not a very diverse group, but I guess things were different then. And when I entered the Foreign Service, I found out that only 4% of Foreign Service officers were Hispanic. Today, the total is 7%, which is still far below the general population totals. And one of the things that the State Department has tried to do in recent years is to try to attract more people from underrepresented communities, African Americans, Hispanics, and other groups, with mixed success. The State Department will tell you they have not done as good a job as it could have. So that is always a priority, especially in this administration, to create a more diverse and inclusive Foreign Service of the United States. I found out when I became a Foreign Service officer, I traveled throughout the US, I had a lot of quizzical looks because a lot of Americans still don't know what Foreign Service officers do. Maybe they imagine that there are a lot of cocktail parties and people in pinstripe suits and holding teacups to the, in parties, but it's not really that at all. It's really about representing the interests of the United States. And what are the interests of the United States? I would argue that the interests of the United States is to promote democracy, promote our values, American values, which are support for democracy and human rights, and to try to ensure the security, safety, and well-being of the American people, which these days leads us to get involved in issues like climate change, which I never did at the beginning of my career, trafficking people, the rights of the LGBT community, and things like that. So the world has changed, and so has the Foreign Service. But for me, it was a great career. I came in as a political officer. If you are interested in the Foreign Service, you might know that there are 5 different specialties in the Foreign Service: political, economic, consular, management, and public diplomacy. And I was a political officer. The political officers are the ones who, of course, report on political events to Washington to let the State Department know what's going on in foreign countries, negotiate treaties, report on elections, changes of government, and things like that. And but for my first tour, I was assigned to the Dominican Republic, which for me was a blessing because I spoke the language as a native Spanish speaker, and the cultures of Cuba and the Dominican Republic are very similar. So I did not have much of a learning curve as far as understanding the country and the people and making contacts and things like that. And I think that helped my career in the early stages. When I came in, Foreign Service officers are asked to do consular work at the beginning. It's sort of a rite of passage. So for the 3/4 of my tour, I was in a visa line deciding who gets to come to the United States, who qualifies under our immigration law. And many people think that job is tedious and stressful, and it is. But at the same time, it gives you a very good view of the country and its citizens, and to understanding the needs of the people, what they're going through, et cetera. And that helped me later when I moved to the political section and had to report on elections that were taking place. So Dominican Republic was a very fascinating tour for me, especially when I was in the political section. There was an election where the president, Balaguer, who had been in power for 16 years, was running for re-election. And I was assigned to go to the second largest city in the Dominican Republic, Santiago, and report on the election. And that night, as I went to bed, the military stopped the vote count. So the next morning, my instructions were find the authorities in charge, tell them the United States does not support you, release all the people you have arrested, and things like that. And as a first tour officers, I had to call generals up and say, by the way, we would appreciate if you would release the people you have arrested. Well, to make a long story short, the crisis was averted after 2 or 3 days. The military stepped back and the election results were respected. But to me, that was a great, exciting opening to my diplomatic career. From there, I wanted to learn a foreign language. I spoke Spanish and English. And there is a bit of a phenomenon, and there was at that time, where most Latinos who came into the Foreign Service went to Latin America. And people told me that I should branch out to prove my worth in other bureaus. So I said, okay, there's an opening in Lisbon, Portugal. And I went to Lisbon. I learned Portuguese. And that was a totally different situation from the rocking Caribbean, where people are happy out in the streets dancing merengue, to northern Portugal. I was in Oporto first, where the women wore black and the national song was a fado, lamenting the fate of the Portuguese explorers in the 15th century. So that was quite an adjustment, but they too had interesting issues. They had a government that, in 1975, they had a revolution, and they still had vestiges of some communist institutions and things like that. So that was fascinating as well. Went back to Washington, and I was made the desk officer for Nicaragua at a time when the Sandinistas took over and the Contras started fighting the Sandinistas. And that too was a very interesting and exciting time to be in Washington, and to understanding how Washington works, the State Department's role in the interagency process. When you sit down at a meeting with the Defense Department, the Commerce Department, the Treasury Department, the White House, and others, and people look to states to find out what's going on in these countries, because State Department is supposed to have the best knowledge of foreign countries and what's going on there. So I learned a lot at that tour of how the interagency process works in Washington. And I think that's why a lot of you come to GW, is to understand how Washington works, and you are very well placed to do that. From Nicaragua, by then I neglected to say that I got married after my first tour to a young lady I had met in the Dominican Republic, who is still my wife after all these years. And we have 3 daughters and 6 grandchildren. But we decided to go from Washington to Haiti. I wanted to learn French. And in Haiti, I had an opportunity to be the head of a political section. And that too was a fascinating tour, because we had a president for life, Jean-Claude Duvalier. And that was a situation where the US was pushing Haiti to move toward democracy and human rights. So part of my job was to visit dissidents who were under house arrest and in jail, and keeping up with who's been arrested and what human rights violations were occurring. Another difficult but very, very interesting assignment. And then I came back to Washington for another tour in the European Bureau as a Portugal desk officer. From there, I went to Paris for 3 years and got to use my French that I had learned before going to Haiti. And that was a totally different ballgame, a big embassy where the president of the United States visited 2 or 3 times a year, issues with NATO and the European Union. And that gave me a more well-rounded background for my career. Came back to Washington, spent a year in a program called the Senior Seminar, where I got to travel all over the US, learning about issues in the US before going back overseas. Went back to the Western Hemisphere Affairs Bureau. And then I was lucky enough to be named by President Clinton ambassador to Nicaragua. And that was an honor, of course, for me to have been born in another country, naturalized citizen to represent the United States as their ambassador. And when you're an ambassador, it's a totally different game because you are responsible for all the US government American activities in the country. And that includes the Peace Corps, the Agency for International Development, the Commerce Department, other agencies, and the like. So that's a job of a lot of responsibility. And of course, the Congress is very interested, and they're looking over your shoulder and saying, do this, do that. Fascinating, frustrating at times, but quite an honor. Came back to be the #2 in the Western Hemisphere Affairs Bureau. That's when Diego was mentioning at the beginning that on September 11th, 2001, I had accompanied Secretary of State Powell to Lima, Peru. We were supposed to go to Peru and Colombia for one of his Secretary Powell's first trips to South America. And we're supposed to sign, it was an OAS meeting, we were supposed to sign the Inter-American Democratic Charter. So we are having breakfast with President Toledo of Peru, 8 of us at that time. And the secretary's aide comes in with a little piece of paper that says, a plane has just hit one of the World Trade Center towers. And the secretary read it out loud, and we were all shocked. I, for one, didn't think that was an accident. And then 5 minutes later, the aide comes back with another piece of paper that says, a second plane is hit the second tower. And then Secretary Powell, understanding the gravity of the situation, instructed his staff, get my plane ready, we're going back. So we had to cancel the rest of the trip. But before leaving, while the plane was getting ready, Secretary Powell said, I want to go to the OAS plenary to see if I can sign the Inter-American Democratic Charter, a very important document, as Diego said, because it establishes that only democracies can participate in the OAS in its institutions. So when we arrived there, we were met by a tremendous amount of goodwill. All the foreign ministers came over and shared our pain at that tragic moment on September 11th. But as it happens at these meetings, many of them wanted to speak and say something. And Secretary Powell at one point turned to me and said, listen, we got to go. The plane is almost ready. So I had to do something undiplomatic and go write a note to the speaker, who happened to be the foreign minister of Honduras, saying, Secretary Powell has to leave right now. So he got it. He stopped his speech, and we were able to have Secretary Powell speak and move to accept the Democratic Charter by acclamation, which the ministers did in a rare moment of total unity to the OAS. Even Venezuela signed the Inter-American Democratic Charter at that time. So that was a very moving moment. And then, of course, we flew back. And when we landed in Washington, we were the only plane flying because all the other planes had been grounded. And it was something you never forget. After that, I was named by then President Bush to be ambassador to Argentina. And we spent 3 fascinating years in Argentina. Difficult years because this was a time when the whole so-called pink tide was taking place in the hemisphere with a lot of populist governments, Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, Evo Morales in Bolivia. And in Argentina, the government there was moving in that direction. And not only that, but they were the hosts for the Summit of the Americas, where they invited 34 presidents to come to Argentina to meet. And as being in charge of the embassy, that was quite a logistical challenge when the president of the United States comes to your country, and he doesn't come with a party of 10. He comes with hundreds of people doing communications, security, logistics, you name it. And when the White House staff comes in and the Secret Service and all these people, they need to be taken care of. So we did nothing for 2 months, but prepare for the meeting and making sure that the president and his staff were able to conduct their business. The meeting did not go very well because, there was a divide between Hugo Chavez and Argentina joined in, and other countries who were against our agenda for free trade. But at the end of the day, the president was able to conduct his business, and then he went to Brazil, and he was no longer my problem. But that was a fascinating time as well. And ever since then, I figured after Argentina, having been ambassador twice, and my wife was kind of tired of traveling. One of my daughters was getting married, and the other one, who had been married, as soon as I retired, gave us our first grandchild. So ever since then, I've been teaching here 14 years. I've taught at Johns Hopkins and at the Foreign Service Institute, and I'm the executive director of a foundation that supports the Foreign Service, which keeps me involved in projects that support Foreign Service officers in new areas like PTSD, because Foreign Service officers do a lot of work with the military now and have been in areas of conflict like Iraq and Afghanistan. And, trying to help the Foreign Service enter this area of diversity and inclusion, and doing what we can in those areas, doing a little consulting on the side. That's what you heard, that I have an LLC. It's not a mega company. It's just a vehicle that allows me to do some consulting. But I want to make this as interactive as possible, and happy to discuss with you any questions you have, either about my career, the Foreign Service, or anything else you'd like to talk about. So Ali and Ari, over to you.
Well, I'm gonna moderate because Ali's having some Wi-Fi issues. So before anything, again, I want to say thank you and to appreciate you, Ambassador Gutirez, for sharing with us all of these fascinating stories and missions that you have experienced throughout your career. It's a privilege to have the possibility of hearing all of this from you. So once again, thank you. Also, we want to make it interactive as well with the participants. So we want to thank everyone who joined us in the event. And we encourage you to submit any questions that you might have to Ambassador Gutirez through the chat to me rather than the Q&A sections, just so we don't miss any questions. And while we wait and we wait for you to think some questions that you might have, I will go ahead and I will ask some things that we as LATAM at GW formulated. And so the first thing I wanted to ask is that if it was hard to get into the Foreign Service, you mentioned that there was this maybe lack of heterogeneity within the diplomats who got into the Foreign Service the year you did. And so I wanted to ask if it was hard for you and if you think that today the situation is different.
I think that, yes, I think the answer is that today there are many ways, not only one way to get into the Foreign Service. In my day, you had to take a written exam and then an oral exam. pass a security clearance, and it might take a year for everything, for the whole process to take place. And it wasn't that easy to get in at that time. And the exam is still can be challenging, but you can take it as many times as you want. But now there are more requirements. In addition to passing the written exam, then you go to something called the QEP, the Qualification Evaluations Panel, and they ask you to write 6 essays to check your writing style, your knowledge, etc. And they look at your background, and they look at do you speak foreign languages? Have you been overseas? If you speak one of those hard to learn foreign languages that are very much in demand, like maybe Mandarin or Arabic, or until recently Pashto in Afghanistan and others, you might get some more points to get more up the ladder a bit quicker. And then you have to pass the oral, and then you finally get in. That is the normal process. Now, there are also new fellowships that present very good opportunities to get into the Foreign Service. And if you go to careers@state.gov, you can find the different ways. The fellowships are the Pickering and Rangel, RANGEL fellowships. And what these fellowships provide is that if you're selected, the State Department will give you a stipend, so you can get a master's at an area related to international affairs. And after that, they will, during that process, they will send you on internships at state and overseas. And after you finish your master's, you're guaranteed 5 years employment in the State Department until you can pass all the adequate exams. There are also other programs, the Presidential Management Fellows, which is another way to get into the US government, the Pathways program. I would look at all these and see what works best for you. And there's also a program called the Consular Fellows Program, where you will be hired as a visa officer for as much as 5 years and sent to one place where there's a need for visa officers, which could be Brazil, the Philippines, Mexico, or someplace like that where the visa workload is very large. And there you can spend 5 years, not as a Foreign Service officer, but pretty much as, overseas with housing and doing interesting work. So that's another Foreign Service experience people can do. And the other one is, of course, a civil service, which is part of the Foreign Service, but they are the people who stay in Washington for the most part. But they have some very interesting jobs in foreign policy in Washington and the State Department. The route to a civil service job is the more traditional civil service route here of USA Jobs. And of course, if you get yourself known, you might hear of opportunities. So networking is very important. I would urge you to, if you ever have a speaker from the State Department, make sure you network. I would try to attend events where foreign policy issues are discussed. Go there in person, share your card, and through networking, you'd be surprised how many opportunities come your way.
Great, thank you. I will ask one more question related to this and with your own story, and then I'm gonna ask some questions of the Q&A. How did you get interested in the Foreign Service at the moment that you decided to apply? And at the same time, was it hard to get accepted because of being Latino, or you think that that wasn't something that conditioned applicants at the time, but rather there weren't too many Latino applicants? I just got this stuck on my mind that you mentioned of having 2 African descendants and then maybe 2 or 3 females, you as the only Latino, and then the rest all white male Americans. So I wanted to ask if, do you think that at the time it was harder for Latinos than today? And at the same time, if there was something in your personal experience that you felt that was kind of harder for you than for some quote unquote average white male American?
Well, that's a number of questions there, Artie. I'll do my best here. As far as me, having been born in Cuba and having had to leave my country of birth at age 10 because of international political events, that sparked an interest in me in international relations, the Foreign Service, etc. My father was a mathematician. I scored highest in math and science. So had it not been for Fidel Castro, who knows, I might have been a mediocre engineer or something like that. But I was fascinated by my international relations. And when I graduated from college, there wasn't a clear path to the Foreign Service. I did not pass the exam the first time. So I decided to teach for a couple of years. And then eventually I was able to pass the oral exam and get in. So yes, at the time, there weren't too many of us in the Foreign Service. And I can understand why in a way, because Latino communities in the US, in our culture, I think what is stressed by new immigrants is trying to make it in the new country. And how do you make it? And what our parents and grandparents knew are the careers that, assure you a comfortable life: doctor, lawyer, businessman, teacher, etc. Nobody thinks Foreign Service officer or diplomat or those kind of opportunities. So we and the State Department at the time did not actively go to recruit to universities that are feeders for Hispanics, Hispanic serving institutions, as they call them, St. Mary's in Texas, or some of the California universities, FIU in South Florida, Puerto Rico, etc. So many Latinos did not know about the Foreign Service, didn't think it was a career for them. I think in recent years, there have been more efforts to recruit from those institutions and to spread the word to those communities, to send young Foreign Service officers, mid-level officers, to those places to speak and to say, look, I made it out of LA. I know one young lady who is currently in Mexico City as a Foreign Service officer, and she came out of LA in an area where gangs pretty much dominated, and yet she was able to get out of that environment and become a political officer in Jerusalem and now in Mexico City. And there are many stories like that. We have to share those stories to bring in more Latinos into the Foreign Service. And the number has gone up to 7%, but still it is, a far cry from the 18% of the general population.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I know there were a lot of questions, but I didn't want to leave anything out.
No, that's fine. I might have forgotten one or two. I don't know.
No, you responded most of it, so thank you. I'm gonna go with a question from Diana Castillo. Thank you for asking this question that says, as to writing styles, what advice or tips do you have for an inspiring FCOs that may struggle with writing or aren't too confident in their writing styles?
Yeah, yes, that is an excellent question, because the Foreign Service officer, the ambassador, the assistant secretary lives in a world of daily crises, quick decisions, 20 meetings a day and things like that. And we don't have time to read poetry. I mean, maybe at night, but the type of writing that is effective in the government is very succinct, to the point. What happened? What are the implications? And what are your recommendations? Pretty much. It's not. It was a gray summer afternoon as the seals were playing in the bay. I mean, that's great, but people don't have time. It's just about making quick decisions, understanding. I mean, you have to explain the situation and understand it, but at the same time, it's not very effective to, the type of writing that might get you points in an English class. Although English expression has to be there. I mean, that is a must component for anybody entering the Foreign Service, being able to express yourself well in English, written and speaking, writing and speaking. But I don't want to say academic writing, but poetic writing is not really what people are looking for. It's government writing, succinct to the point. A, B, C, D, this happened. This is the effect. And these are my recommendations for going ahead. So I would say an internship in the State Department or an internship in a government agency, the White House would be good. So you can see that world and how it operates. And talk to people, network. But yeah, the writing is different. So I would say in writing your essays, there you can expand a little bit more, but don't. Make sure you have the topic sentence, you have the thrust of what you're saying right away, and don't waste the principal's time, as we say.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna go with last question. I think Diego wanted to mention something. Diego, you can go first, and then I can allow one participant to ask its question.
Go ahead and let the participant. And I simply want to ask Ambassador, thank you very much for this terrific presentation, Ambassador Lino. I understand that you are the executive director of a foundation that is devoted to strengthening the Foreign Service.
Right.
Could you tell us exactly what that foundation does, and what is the work, and whether or not our students can look at opportunities in terms of relating, interacting, learning, or networking with the people in that foundation that you direct?
Well, I wish it were a foundation of hundreds of employees, but we don't have that. It is a very strange foundation in a way. The IRS is still trying to figure us out because we are a nonprofit that supports a government agency and supports the Foreign Service. So we're semi-unique in that. And it happened because our founder, Mrs. Cox, Una Chapman Cox, 43 years ago, established this foundation to help Foreign Service officers. When Mrs. Cox had been younger, she had been caught in Bombay, India, now Mumbai, during the independence disturbances. She was on a ship that was visiting, and she was arrested and thrown in jail because she had no papers. And she had left them on the ship, her passport and all that. So she was saved by a Foreign Service officer who got her out of jail, found lodging for her, and put her on a plane the following Monday after the authorities let her go. And as she got up in years, she had a lot of Texas land that had oil and natural gas. And she wanted to establish a foundation to help people like the young man who had helped her on that occasion. And that is the Una Chapman Cox Foundation. And we've been helping the State Department for 43 years. And we do things like sabbatical fellowships. We allow 2 foreign services a year to take a year off and pursue a project on their own to sort of recharge our batteries and go back being more effective. We have done studies. We hire Booz Allen and Deloitte and other companies, a Rand Corporation, to conduct studies about the State Department, to help mentoring, show Foreign Service officers how to establish a good mentoring system and the like. And right now we're doing podcasts. We had supported the American Diplomat podcasts and the General and the Ambassador podcasts for a couple of years to bring the word about the Foreign Service to the American public, and to educate the American public, because let's face it, in the last 4 years, diplomacy did not have the highest regard in many circles. So we have to keep explaining what we do and why it's important to have the State Department out there and not rely on the US military for every problem that might arise in the world. So that's what we do. I mean, if you look at uccoxfoundation.org or just Google Una Chapman Cox Foundation, you will see our website and find ways to contact us. But we only have 2 people in Washington, and the rest of our folks are in Texas and other parts of the country. But we're happy to help with whoever has any questions and wants to contact us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I will go ahead and I will let Rene Fuentes to speak, and so he or she can ask you the last question, if that's fine. Okay. I think Rene, now you can speak.
Thanks, Ari. Hi, Ambassador. This is Rene Renault. I actually got married last year.
Congratulations. Hi, how are you?
Thank you. So good to hear from you and see you. This has been fantastic. And I wanted to ask a question that you probably get asked a lot, but I'll try to put a unique spin on it. In terms of promoting democracy in Cuba, and what people can do that are not in the Foreign Service, I mean, just everyday folks like us, I mean, how can we promote democratic values in general? Is there anything we can do from our side as just citizens of the US to promote it, if we have family in Miami or just a passion for it?
Well, that's a very good question, because on July 11th, I think an event took place that will have medium and long-term consequences for the Cuban regime, because people took to the streets all over the island to protest. At first, the reporting was, well, they're protesting economic conditions, and they're protesting COVID and the lack of access to vaccines or whatever. But very soon, those who reported what the protesters were saying, the main theme was libertad, libertad. They were asking for liberty, for freedom, after 62 years of the same regime. And the Cuban government acted swiftly, arresting hundreds, some of whom are still under detention. And they were able to quell the disturbance for now, but I do think it showed what's underneath the surface there. And I think just by shining a light on what's going on and reporting and keeping in touch with some of the people who are in the island, there's something called SOS Cuba, and the San Isidro movement, artists who are trying to use artistic freedom to fight the regime. I think supporting for these people and brave people and organizations who are there is one way to make a difference.
Okay, well, with that being said, thank you so much. I want to really appreciate everyone who joined us, and also to Diego and Lino.
Can I ask a last question?
Yes, of course.
You know, tell us, you've been in Nicaragua, the ambassador, the US ambassador in Nicaragua. What was the most challenging moment of your tenure as an ambassador in Nicaragua?
Oh man, you would bring that up. Well, you know, poor Nicaragua, because they have gone through so much, and unfortunately now they have an authoritarian regime who has taken over all aspects of power. They were in the opposition when I was there, and they had threatened to have a general strike. So it was a very delicate balancing act between keeping the fragile democracy at that time going with US help. At the same time, we had the Congress thinking we had not gone far enough in returning property to people who had lost their property. And then there were charges of corruption against the president. So it was a very delicate balancing act at that time. And eventually it resulted in Daniel Ortega changing the rules to be able to win an election and become president. And many of us knew that once he got into power, it'd be difficult or impossible to get him out. And that's the situation that Nicaraguans are facing today.
Okay, well, now, again, I want to say thank you one more time, and then I want to give Diego and Lino the possibility of saying anything you have in mind or want to share or mention before we finish the event.
No, thank you very much. If I can ever help in anything, any of you, my email is Lino, Lino Guti, Guti, at GWU.edu. If you want to talk about the Foreign Service or anything else, very happy to be a part of the GW Latin American Studies family. And thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you so much. Diego, do you want to say something else?
Yeah, well, very, very brief. Thank you very much, Ambassador Gutierrez. This is a wonderful way of closing our Hispanic Heritage, Latinx Hispanic Heritage Month with your presence. As we say in Spanish, es un lujo tenerte como speaker. It is a luxury for us to have you as speaker in this closing event. Thank you very much. Thank you, LATAM. Thank you, Diversity and Inclusion. Thank you, LEA, for making it possible to have this event. And I think I would like to ask Kelly, if Kelly, if you're there, maybe you want to say a few last words to close the event.
Yes, thank you so much. I think that you all have summarized it so wonderfully. And, you know, I think that this has been such a wonderful event, and we look forward to celebrating and uplifting our Latinx and Hispanic communities throughout the whole year. You know, it's not just about Heritage Month, though this is a special time that's brought us together. So we thank all of you for being here and learning with us and listening with us and sharing your wisdom, especially Ambassador Gutirez, for your time. And there are, you know, we'll share the event recording for folks who may not have been able to attend today, but would like to engage with some of what was discussed. But thank you for being in community with us. It means so much. Everyone take care and have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.